good, everybody? It's your boy Instinct back at it again with a new video. And today, this video is going to be interesting. And I got to get to collab with somebody. Introduce yourself.
Yo, what is up, everyone? Corn O'Keefe, and thanks for having me back on my channel, Instinct. Happy to be here.
You too, bro. And today, y'all might be familiar with this one, but we're actually doing how far Monika from Doki Doki Literature Club, or DDLC, whatever you want to call it, like how far she gets into all of Dragon Ball. And we talking about composite here, not just one or two continuities. We're talking about all of them. Now, as Corn wants to get started first, he can go over and then Super.
All right, so starting with Dragon Ball Z, I'm going to go ahead and hop right into the Buu saga, as that's where the most powerful characters in Z actually show themselves. So we look at some of the better statements, feats, and scaling in the Buu saga. We see Kid Buu himself right off the bat is labeled as an immediate threat consistently to the entire universe. Now, there's a couple ways we can look at this universe. Well, for one, we can say it's finite. We can lowball it, say it's like a finite size, like the observable universe. Or we can go with the consistent statements in the guidebooks, such as the Daizenshu, that confirm this universe is infinitely large. Now, something to keep in mind about the entire Dragon Ball universe as a whole is it's actually a macrocosm that contains several universal-sized space-time continuum. Now, Buu was going to destroy all of this infinitely large universe within the living world within a finite period of time. So right off the bat, if you go with the finite scaling, this would be multi-galactic, very casually. If you go with the infinite universal scaling, then this would be high universal, aka infinitely third dimensional power for Kid Buu. Now there are some feats that back this up for Kid Buu, and for the record, we will be including both the manga and the anime for the most part throughout this video for Z and some of Super. That being said, the feats that I was referring to would be when Kid Buu threatened the Grand Kai planet. Now, what's impressive and very important to keep in mind about this is the fact that the Grand Kai planet takes up a very big chunk of heaven. It's actually a good chunk when compared to the planet known as heaven. Now, this planet known as heaven is confirmed to be about as wide as the universe. As previously mentioned, you can either have it at finite or infinitely large. So he's going to be either destroying this large chunk of finite universal proportion, or he's going to be destroying this large chunk of infinity. So once again, multi-galactic or high universal. We also have him and Goku being confirmed by the Elder Supreme Kai that they literally ravaged the realm, the Supreme Kai realm, to be precise. Now, this Supreme Kai realm is actually confirmed to be about 1/10 the size of the Dragon Ball Z or the Universe 7 macrocosm, you could say. So once again, multi-galactic up to high universal, depending on how you scale it. So you can easily get Kid Buu very casually to multi-galactic or high universal. Once again, infinitely third dimensional power. Now we move on to some higher stuff, some higher feats, some scaling. We get to Buuhan. Now Buuhan is obviously Super Buu after he absorbed Gotenks, Piccolo, Gohan, So now Buuhan is a very interesting character because when he became enraged, he started using an amped version of essentially the Vice Shout. And if you recall, base Super Buu used the Vice Shout. He was able to scream and rip a portal hole in space-time, as shown in the hyperbolic time chamber, aka the room of spirit and time, to escape back into the main universe in the living room. Now, what's very impressive about this amped Vice Shout is the fact that it was literally tearing apart space-time on a. Now, what's very important to keep in mind about this enraged Vice Shout is the fact that it was ripping through space-time on a universal scale, and it was actually confirmed that if this kept going, that the energy he was generating was going to literally destroy the entire universe. It was even going to suck in other dimensions on top of it. So this feat right here can be scaled a couple of ways, right? You can lowball it and go with the safe way, if you want to call it that, and say it's a universal plus feat, as he's clearly destroying space-time on a universal scale, bare minimum. But if you want to include the fact that he would be obviously sucking in other dimensions as well on top of this, you could argue this to be a low multiversal feat, as these other dimensions would obviously be universal in size or large chunks of infinities, etc., etc. So you easily, right off the bat, have universal plus to low multiversal for the Buhan feat. Obviously, Vegito, even in base, would be not far behind, and as a Super Saiyan, even while still holding back, he was able to overwhelm this attack from Buhan. So in terms of speed, hopping right into that, we have something impressive from Goku during the 7-year time skip between the Cell games and the Buu saga. When he crossed the afterlife in a finite period of time, once again, if you go off finite scaling, there's calculations that get this feat anywhere from quadrillions of times the speed of light up to sextillions of times the speed of light, and even septillions of times the speed of light. And this is Goku in his base form. And if you go off the infinite scaling, he would have been crossing an infinite distance in a finite period of time, which would be infinite speed for base Goku before the Buu saga. We get to the Buu saga, obviously, as I mentioned, Buu was an immediate threat to the entire universe. While once again, finite scaling, this would be comparable to Goku's feat. If you go with the infinite scaling, this would be obviously infinite speed, because he's yet again crossing an infinite distance in a finite time. So you can have these characters in the Buu saga pretty freaking casually, quadrillions, quintillions, sextillions, septillions of times the speed of light. And you can also stack on the multipliers on top of that. You have Super Vegito. You can even include Super Saiyan 3 Vegito if you really want to go there, because there's nothing that says he doesn't have it. And we know Gotenks can do Super Saiyan 3. So Vegito, seeing as Goku has Super Saiyan 3, it's logical to say he could do that. Or you can have him at all infinite speed. So as you can see, the Z saga, and the Buu saga is pretty formidable in its own right. Now, they have some hacks, obviously. They have stuff like the candy beam, like for the Buus. They have absorption tactics. They have stuff from like even Deborah, the stone spit, which can petrify you. Ki obviously affects you on a mental, spiritual, and physical level. It's pretty much consistent throughout the entire series. And yeah, they have a lot of resistance. They have resistance to transmutation, as shown by Vegito. They have resistance to mind control, as shown by Majin Vegeta, etc., etc. So we move into Super. We get right to the Battle of Gods fight. Goku, as a Super Saiyan God, clash fists with Beerus. They threaten to annihilate the entire macrocosm. Now, this is impressive because the living world contains the infinitely large universe, or finite, whichever one you want to go with. But it also contains the demon realm, which is parallel, pretty much comparable to the universe. And then you have the afterlife, which is hermetically sealed off from the living world. The afterlife itself contains the planet Heaven, as I mentioned earlier, which is either as wide as a finite universe or an infinitely large one. Then you have the Hell realm in the afterlife, which is a comparable size. You have the Supreme Kai realm, once again, being 1/10 the size of finite macrocosm or infinitely large macrocosm. And Beerus and Goku were going to annihilate all of this and turn it to an empty void of nothingness, annihilate space-time. So this is a casual low multiversal feat. Goku would obviously go on to absorb this level of power as a Super Saiyan and surpass Super Saiyan God. Then he absorbed into his base form. His base eventually surpassed Super Saiyan God, etc., etc. He does more training with Whis, Resurrection F Saga. They keep getting stronger from there. The multipliers, the insane Zenkai boost, the Goku Black Arc really gives him a lot of that. The Hit fight, his rematch with Hit, he only needed Super Saiyan Blue to take out Hit, whereas he needed Super Saiyan Blue Kaioken times 10 to fight him the first time. So right off the bat, that's a bare minimum 10 times of a difference from arc to arc right there. We get to the Tournament of Power. Goku, Ultra Instinct Omen Phase 1, just appearing and existing, casually shakes the infinitely large Ward of Void with his ki alone. We get to Jiren. Jiren does the same thing while heavily suppressed. We have God of Destruction Toppo shaking this infinitely large Ward of Void with his God of Destruction ki and completely warping it and distorting it and actually changing what the Grand Priest did to it, which was manipulate it and turn it green, this infinitely large structure. Now, we also have other stuff like the Gods of Destructions clashing. Their clash, like Beerus and Champa, were threatening to destroy 2 macrocosms, aka 6 and 7. So yeah, you can easily see that there are very casual low multiversal feats throughout all of Super. And if you want to apply multipliers and other scaling, you can even get them up to the full-on multiversal ranges, right? So, and obviously there's infinite speed feats to back all the other stuff up as well from Z that I mentioned, such as Goku and or the finite speed, such as Goku and Beerus clashing their flashes and shockwaves were crossing bare minimum finite universe in a finite time, which would also support the calcs that I named earlier. Or if you go off infinite, then there you go, another speed feat. And you also have the Tournament of Power, God of Destruction Topo shaking this large, infinitely large realm, right? And his Ki Blast firing across it in a finite time. Characters like Vegeta can dodge it and react to those. Jiren's energy, Goku's Ki, shook and expanded across this infinite distance in a finite time. We know Ki, unless stated otherwise, correlates to all your stats. Speed would be included in that. So yeah, you can clearly get the idea and get a gist that Z and Super, especially the Buu Saga, and from there on, you can easily get them to Universal Plus up to low multiversal or even multiversal. You can easily get them to very high numbers into finite speed, or you can get them to infinite speed, very high into it. Now for hacks and Super, obviously you have the Hakai from the Gods of Destructions, which can erase you from existence, your entire mind, body, and soul across all timelines. Very impressive. You have time manipulation from Hit, his assassination techniques along with his time manipulation. He can literally stop time a few seconds. He can make his own parallel realms, turn invisible, literally uses killing blows on you since this is not in a tournament situation. You have stuff like Zeno, who has an even stronger erasure than the Hakai. You have the Angels who can reverse time for a couple minutes. And you have the Angels along with, if you use MUI Goku, they have very impressive instinctive reaction, like aka mastered Ultra Instinct. And obviously characters have shown resistances to time manipulation, such as Goku, Jiren. They've shown resistance to existence erasure and Super. The list goes on. So with that out of the way, I think Instinct might want to hop in and go over some video game scaling, like heroes.
Now the canon materials stuff is out of the way. Let's get right into the meat and greedy stuff, their hero stuff. Now, if we're starting off in Xenoverse, Xenoverse is casually multiversal plus, and it's actually directly stated that history can take up an infinite amount of numbers or paths or possibilities, and you lose track of which the correct version is supposed to be. Now, history actually refers to timelines. In fact, Xenoverse 6 Android 16 implies that the possibilities already exist by saying that the history they are in is one possibility and the others have timelines. And there's a promotion like the new DDLC, which is few, as you can see here. Even the next pack is called Infinite History Pack, but people gonna say I'm using name fallacy without a context. It would be true, but actually, which also in fact goes back to the Time Patrol's statement of history being infinite. Even Herms himself actually translated this and says all sorts of possibilities are overflowing, stated by the Supreme God of Time. Now, some people from a particular site try to say that possibilities don't exist, even if 16 confirmed they do. However, in Heroes, Corona says the possibilities are overflowing, which stated by Herms, the translator, as well. Even in Shin Budokai, Cell states that there are endless worlds, which meaning timelines. The debunk for this being that Cell doesn't know what he's talking about. However, Cell is created for the sole purpose of being the perfect being. He is incredibly smart and has done time travel. In Shin Budokai, his purpose is to destroy parallel worlds. Why would he be so confident if he didn't know much there are? The producers of the game wouldn't have made him say if it wasn't true. And he isn't an authority figure, is as much as a debunk of certainly stated that he can destroy the solar system. Doesn't mean he can. Even in Dragon Ball Online, there are seemingly infinite timelines. So yeah, and I'll show you down in the link below. There's more evidence for it. In fact, even in the Dragon Ball Z manga, there is an implication of infinite timelines by Trunks. This also seems very similar to the statement by the Patroller in Xenoverse. What's funny is that some people accept this as likely infinite timelines, but it has been retconned in Super, which it hasn't, which you need to prove it. But in fact, it's been proven when Beerus kills Zamasu. Now, this is at least high layers into Multi Plus already. And I'll get to more scans of consistently being Multi Plus for even a first Xenoverse game. In Xenoverse, time is infinite, so after Demigra absorbing Toki, Demigra has actually gained infinite power. This will make him at least infinite on layers into Multi Plus. And also, Demigra rules all of space and time, which would be low multiversal structure or possibly multiversal time scrolls. Again, another layers into multi plus. And then Demagogue then proves he is indeed another layer to the multi plus by destroying everything. After destroying it, he said he was going to create his own history. He has both creation and destruction feat statements that are another layer to multi plus. Even like Beerus, like Xenoverse was stated that Beerus can destroy the entire dimension of time and all of history and everything, which would be a layer for Beerus into multi plus. Corona stated that Demagogue warped time and was going to destroy all of history, everything, and could have created his own infinite multiverse, at least where he was stated to be God. And now, let me get into like the 5D stuff, because this is nothing compared to what I'm going to show. For the crack of time, it's stated to be an enclosed space separate from the dimension of time. And in your promotional material, this scan actually states that the place that he was beyond time and space, meaning that the crack of time is a space dimension that's beyond time and space of the regular fourth dimension multiverse. So you can argue that to be 5D. And add to more consistency, I can argue that even Android 16 stated the Time Patrol is stated to be an extra dimensional being, which means he comes from a dimension beyond our own. We live in 3 spatial and 1 temporal. Sound familiar? And before anyone says he is just from another universe and not actually a higher dimensional being, first of all, that's extraterrestrial, not extra dimensional. I don't know where y'all get that from. And now, if we go beyond the crack of time and into the real world, which is in Dragon Ball Heroes, and the real world is actually said to be a different dimensional or world or multiverse, instead to be a higher dimension. And more add-on to this, a dimension that views Dragon Ball Heroes as fiction, so now that would actually be another consistencies into 6-dimensional. If you wanna go like as a highball, I can argue this to be 7-dimensional, since that there are like extra dimensional doors which are in the Dragon Ball Heroes world, but an extra dimensional could be meaning like dimensions beyond our own. So you can argue that to be 7-dimensional, but even if you don't want to go along with that, Dragon Ball Heroes is at least 5 to 6-dimensional. And with all that out of the way, let's get into the scaling of the girl Monika. Now, as for her, let's get into her attack potency first, then the speed, then the all hacks and stuff. For her AP, she's at least Uni plus to low multi. She recreated and eventually destroyed the entire game, which is a universe of its own in its time. So it should be at least Uni plus to low multi. And for higher to low multi argument, you can argue that each save file is likely an entirely alternate timeline to the current events of the game. And the game can contain up to 54 save files, easily erase all these save files at several points during the game. But if you want to go a bit higher, you can argue all that to be multi-plus, meaning you can destroy and recreate the game and does it multiple times. The game itself is described as a world of infinite choices. The save files can be considered alternative timelines. The game itself can hold up to 54 save files, and Monika easily destroyed all of them with her full power. And her abilities bypass conventional durability. And add on to more consistency, if you play at the end of the game and you hear Monika's song, and one of those segments is a world of infinite choices, that'll actually be more consistently into infinite 4D or multiversal plus. And now if we get into the speed, which is known as inaccessible speed, was able to continue moving after time no longer going or no longer existing. And obviously, for inaccessible speed, like people will try to confuse inaccessible speed and infinite speed, which, to be honest, it's not the same tier of speed at all, to be fair with you. While infinite speed, the ability to move infinite distance within a finite time, while inaccessible speed, the ability to move distance, whether finite or infinite, within 0 time. This is usually achieved by moving in places outside of time or places where time doesn't flow. And I know I forgot about the hero speed scaling and hacks and stuff, but I'll get into it later after I deal with Monika. After that's done, let's get into her abilities. Well, as for her hacks, she's really known for is her plot manipulation. And what she does with plot manipulation, meaning she has control of what happens in the game and can truly manipulate the events of the game. And it's really consistent too. I'm going to show scans of her doing so. And she also have reality warp in a narrative way, and means she's able to bend and warp the game world to her liking or choosing. And she easily has existence eraser, meaning that she can delete the files of the characters and deleted the entire game several times. You can argue that the game itself is a concept. You can argue her to be have conceptual erasure, but since she also has plot manipulation, you can argue that to have narrative erasure. And basically, she has immortality, at least type 4, meaning that she can resurrect other characters and herself, which adds more to resurrection hacks as well. And she has type 5, meaning that even if she doesn't even exist or she gets deleted, she can live without even existing. So that should at least be type 5 immortality. And that adds on to non-corporeal and non-existent physiology, meaning she can still exist and affect the game world when her file was even erased. And you could argue inorganic physiology type 2, meaning it's ultimately a computer file. And as for madness manipulation and mind manipulation, controlled the minds of Sayori, Yuri, and Natsuki and made Sayori actually depress it or amped her up a bit and made her commit suicide. And there's another one called power nullification, meaning made the player unable to load any save files and affect time. And she has teleportation and sound manipulation, made music appear out of nowhere while she was erased. Total event collapse and destruction, can erase the game itself and has done it multiple times. She can neg immortality types 1, 3, 4, and 5. Regen negation high godly. Basically erase Sayori after gaining the same power as Monika has. And she can resist plot manipulation herself, meaning she broke out of the script of the game. And she can also resist time manipulation, meaning unaffected by time, no longer moving. And she also has time manip herself. She can stop time and speed up time, basically. And she has a causality type 1, unaffected by time resets, is unbound by time, being unaffected by time being sped up, time being paused and no longer existed. And now, since I'm done with all that for Monika, I'll get into the Dragon Ball Hero speed scaling. And for Dragon Ball like Xenoverse Heroes, they consistently have immeasurable speed actually, meaning that demon gods naturally exist and move in different non-linear flow of time. You can argue that to be immeasurable. There's the same guide that Demigod stated numerous times to transcend space and time. And these mentors are comparable to each other who can fly through different timelines. And some have been defeated before and even been blitzed before. These hero characters are actually superior to Shadow Dragons who flew out infinite timelines with their raw speed alone, which is another impressive immeasurable speed feat. So yeah, they easily have inaccessible to immeasurable speed feats along the way. And now, when we get into the hacks, this is what I'm meeting greedy stuff. They easily have conceptual manipulation as the demon gods were manipulating the demon realm, which can argue to actually be a concept within itself. And then they were messing around with Toki Toki, which can argue to be another concept of itself. And basically, Dragon Ball Heroes got the same hacks as Super and Z, but on a whole nother level. They can BFR people pretty casually and seal people in other timelines. And the demon gods can conceptually erase you in there as well. And they can summon people, they can summon hellfire manipulation, meaning they can summon shit from hell. And the demon gods can actually have adaptation negation. And there's these cards and that their abilities they have. One of these abilities negs stat increases, even passive ones. Even if an enemy gets stronger or can adapt to you, basically this ability just puts it down for the count. That's how OP it is. And they also have concept creation, law manipulation, physics manipulation. And I'll show you the scan for that as well. I haven't gotten to all the hacks in the detail for heroes, but this is basically the gist of it. And now, since we've gone over that stuff, let's get into how strong Monika would actually be in the whole Dragon Ball universe. Would you like to start off?
Sure. So jumping right in to Monika and how she's going to stack up to the Z section. Now, right off the bat, if we go with the low end stuff for Monika, as Instinct mentioned, it would be Uni Plus up to low multiversal. And as for speed, inaccessible speed. Now we look over at the stats from the Buu Saga from the higher tiers. Now, right off the bat, Kid Buu reaching high universal scale and infinite speed. If we go with that scaling, even if we compare that to the Uni Plus, the inaccessible of Monika, he would get utterly speed blitzed in one shot because that's a different dimension of power entirely, essentially dimension of speed entirely. So yeah, Kid Buu, he might have limitless stamina. He might have some good hacks like Candy Beam, Absorption, etc., etc. However, he's too slow and far too weak to even do anything. And Monika has her own fair share of hacks. The plot manipulation alone completely negs. That's really all that needs to be said there. So we get to the Buhan and the Vegito stuff. Now, obviously, they have comparable AP to Monika. If we go with the lower end stuff for Monika, they have Uni Plus to low multiversal scaling in their own right. However, they do still fall short in the speed department as they're only reaching infinite speed at their peak. And Monika would also still have better hacks, as Instinct went over earlier with the hacks. And as I just mentioned, the plot hack alone would be too much. So the Buu Saga, while they may have comparable AP to Monika, they fall short pretty much everywhere else except for combat skill, stuff like that. However, in this situation, skill really isn't going to help for similar reasons that I already mentioned about other situations and other stats. So we hop into Super. Now we get a little more juicy, a little more spicy. So we get to Super. We get full-on concrete, casual, low multiversal feats, and even you can scale these characters to multiversal. So once we go into these low multiversal feats, we can obviously see they're going to be very comparable to Monika in terms of AP, maybe even edged out if we only go with her lower stuff. However, the speed is still there, as she would still be above baseline inaccessible. And while the Dragon Ball characters, yet again, they would be higher into Infinite if we went with that scale. Infinite, you can be as high as you want into it. It's still beneath baseline inaccessible, whereas she's above baseline inaccessible. They're still going to get blitzed, and they have no way to counter plot hacks or conceptual manip, anything of the sort in this situation in particular. So we move on down the line even further. We get to even higher stuff. Something that I waited to mention, right? I wanted to wait to mention about, talk about is Zamasu merging with time, space, and even going into other timelines, and Zeno annihilating him. And obviously Jiren, MUI, other characters throughout the Tournament of Power and Dragon Ball Super Broly, they scale above Infinite Zamasu in their own rights. So why that's impressive is that's an even higher degree of low multiversal, and that should give them the edge in AP pretty easily over, especially with the multipliers. If you want to get them up to full-on multiversal, that would be higher than her lower AP scaling of low multi, and she would have the speed edge still, unless you go with the inaccessible argument for Dragon Ball Super, where Goku was able to move in the empty timeline after Zeno destroyed it, and Zeno was able to float around in there, move around in there, etc., etc. Now, if we went with that, they would have comparable speed. She would still have the hack. So in this situation, with Zeno annihilating Infinite Zamasu, you could actually argue that to be capable of being enough if he has inaccessible speed, along with Jiren and other top tier characters like God's Instructions and Angels. They would probably more than likely edge out if with the lower end stuff with her. However, as Instinct mentioned, she has multiversal plus scaling as well, and it's very concrete in its own right. Now, if we went with the infinite fourth dimensional scaling, she would be infinitely more powerful than anybody in Dragon Ball Super. They would have comparable speed, be in the same tier of speed. If we went with inaccessible scaling, they would get infinitely outclassed in terms of attack power, and they would have absolutely no answer for a lot of her hacks, such as conceptual manip, plot hacks, the list goes on. So with her lower scaling and with the more powerful characters and higher scaling for Dragon Ball Super, they could take some victories. But if you go with her more concrete, higher scaling, the Multiversal Plus, she would utterly annihilate them with her infinitely more greater power and her hacks. So yes, that's how that would end up. Now I'll let Instinct jump into the video game section and just let you know where she stacks up in that.
At best, she'll be comparable to Dragon Ball Online and maybe even Xenoverse 1. But even if we wank her speed to have her at baseline immeasurable, which I don't buy myself, she would still get utterly blitzed and actually get throttled. I'm sorry. And for that, even her with her type 5 immortality, there's actually people in Dragon Ball Heroes who would nag type 8 immortality via the key sword. And Menki Kabura was actually said to have limited regeneration and scales above Demigra. And even if you kill him, he's conceptually like linked to that regeneration. So he would actually have argued to have high godly and maybe even true godly regen. True godly regen for heroes, which is really debatable. But as I said, Monika would actually get throttled when she steps into like the Xenoverse 2 and hero stuff. If you argue like the 5D for Xenoverse, but even with Multi Plus alone, they got have higher layers into Multi Plus and more like consistent layers of immeasurable. So at best, she would be at like Dragon Ball Online or Xenoverse 1 tier at best. And with that out of the way, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. And also, shout out to Corn for actually collaborating with me. And please subscribe to my boy Forrest's channel for helping me record. And now that's out of the way. Hope y'all like this video. And please stay safe, y'all. Peace.